Hi, this is Cale Clark from the Faith Explained Institute and thefaithexplained.com. It's Good Friday 2020, and I want to talk about the crucifixion and death of Jesus. Now, of course, the New Testament documents write about this. We know this. The letters of St. Paul, all four Gospels mention it. But what about other writers from antiquity? Are there any writers from history that talk about the death of Jesus outside of the Bible? The truth is that there are. And one place that you can read about them is in Greg Manette's excellent book called The Wrong Jesus. I strongly encourage you to read this book. It's excellent. You can go ahead and order that on Amazon. And in the section on the death and resurrection of Jesus, Greg mentions very helpfully some of these ancient non-Christian writers that write about Jesus' crucifixion. I'm just going to read you a couple of quotes really quickly. The first is from the great Jewish historian Josephus, who lived in the first century, about 37 to 100 AD. And he wrote this: "When Pilate, upon hearing him accused by men of the highest standing among us, had him condemned to be crucified." Okay, so that's Josephus. He's not a Christian. He authenticates the fact that Jesus was crucified under Pontius Pilate. How about Tacitus, the great Roman historian who lived about AD 60 to 120? He's talking about how Nero blamed Christians for the great fire that raged in Rome, a fire that many people thought Nero set himself. Here's what Tacitus writes. He says, "Nero fastened the guilt of the burning of Rome and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus," and that's a Latinized form of Christ, "Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilatus." So here we have the great Roman historian Tacitus situating Jesus' death in history. At the time, the Roman emperor was Tiberius. Pilate, who we know was the prefect of Judea, had him executed. How about a Greek writer, Lucian of Samosata, in the 2nd century, writing this: "The Christians, you know, worship a man to this day, the distinguished personage who introduced their novel rites and was crucified on that account." So Lucian notes that Christians worshiped Jesus and that he was crucified. How about another Roman source, Marabar, writing in the 2nd or 3rd century? "What advantage came to the Jews by the murder of their wise king, seeing that from that very time their kingdom was driven from them?" So he talks about Jesus as a wise king who was crucified. Well, he doesn't mention the crucifixion, but he does mention his death. And here's another Jewish source, the Talmud, written by various rabbis between the 2nd and 5th centuries. On the eve of the Passover, Yeshu, and that is, of course, the Jewish name of Jesus, it means Joshua, Yeshu was hanged. And you say, hold on, I thought Jesus was crucified. Well, to be crucified or nailed to a piece of wood or nailed to a tree would be the same as considered being hung on a tree. So there you have some ancient writers. They're not Christians. They're not trying to promote faith in Jesus, authenticating the death of Jesus. And as a side benefit, they also authenticate the fact that Jesus existed, that he was an actual historical person. He's not made up, okay? Even John Dominic Crossan, and Greg notes this in his book, the ex-Catholic priest and skeptical biblical scholar, we'll talk much more about him tomorrow when we look at the burial of Jesus. He has said this, that Jesus was crucified is as sure as anything historical can ever be. So we could talk about the meaning of Jesus' death, of course, but that's a theological question. But I want you to know that it is a fact of history. For the Faith Explained Institute, I'm Cale Clark.